Hey there, JohnsonBoss here with the first episode of the Breaking Glad series. Trying to help you guys get better at playing Gladiator Beasts, specifically in Edison format, and just trying to talk about some of the more intermediate to advanced things in this series, kind of assuming that most players know the basics and showing how GBs can win at a really high level. So today we're talking about, I think, probably the most common card in the deck that gets a lot of questions, and that's Gladiator Beast Darius. It is by far the thing that I see Googled the most or asked in forums the most, and so I wanted to start with this video in particular, just because it feels like the most relevant to a lot of people, and oftentimes the most confusing to people playing or not playing the deck because they just don't know how it's ruled, because it is kind of quirky, and so it's understanding to not really know how it works. And so let's go ahead and dive in. The goal of the video is to talk about how the effect works, why it works this way, how it's different than, say, other cards similar to what Darius does, and then also on the back end get into how we can apply this specific effect and its nuances to gameplay and to some game states so that you can use these tricks to win some extra games, because I do think there are an extra 10 to 15% of games that you can win and unlock if you're able to take advantage of Darius, I think, in the proper way. And so that's what we're going to do here today, is simply talk through and show how this works. So let's start with just what Darius is and what the effect is. Darius is the GB that, when it's special summoned by the effect of a GB, it special summons another Gladiator Beast from the graveyard to the field, with the caveat that that GB is negated, its effects are negated, and if Darius leaves the field, at that point that he leaves the field, the GB that Darius special summoned is shuffled into the deck at the same time. So that part's, I want to say, fairly straightforward. There's not a lot of craziness really going on there, but it does get a little trickier. And the real reason is because of that secondary effect that is going to shuffle the GB back into the deck when Darius leaves the field. What that means is, it's instead of something like Debris Dragon, which is a really good common comparison, that special summons something from the graveyard and negates its effects, that Debris Dragon is a permanent instant negation based off of that target whenever it happens, and there's no connection after that fact between Debris Dragon and that monster that it's being negated. Darius, however, works differently. So let's just go over an example with, let's say I Test Tiger Darius. Darius doesn't get Darius in this case. We're not going to go get extra GBs, and then I go ahead and let's say I just snag a Bestiari. So we have Chainlink 1, Darius activates effect as special summon Bestiari. I target Bestiari, Bestiari comes to the field. Bestiari does have its own mandatory effect, so it is special summoned by the effect of a GB, so it does have to activate no matter what. However, Darius is negating it. So we'll talk about examples about why that's important in this video, but right now we're just let's say both these go all the way through, no responses, and we're now in an open game state. We have Darius and Bestiari in the field, and Darius is actively and continually targeting the Gladiator Beast Bestiari on the field right now. And so while it's not in a chain or anything like that, there is an active connection between these two things, and it's doing two things. One, it's guaranteeing that if Darius leaves the field, that GB gets shuffled in, and two, it is continuously negating the Bestiari, which means that there is a way for us to actually prevent that negation from continuing and allowing Bestiari to actually resolve and be a usable GB in the right scenarios. And so that instant, and that rather continuous connection from the moment that the GB is summoned, is the really important critical variable that makes Darius different than the Debris Dragons out there, and it's what creates a lot of these unique interactions that we can take advantage of as Gladiator Beast players. So just to round out how this effect really ultimately works in the end, let's keep it really simple. Let's say for some reason I ended on this board state, our opponent normal summons Ashura and attacks our Darius. In this case, because nothing's changed, Darius goes to the graveyard. Gladiator Beast Bestiari gets shuffled in, and that would be the end of that sequence. Obviously, sure, probably summon something there. Now, that's the basis of how Darius works. If there's no other cards brought into the equation or nothing else changes, that's the simplest version of what's actually happening to make Darius work. Let's start applying Darius's rulings to other interactive cards on the field in the process. So let's go ahead and say we have a game state of our opponent has a few traps set. We're gonna like activate one of them at a time here in random instances just to illustrate this process, not necessarily saying this is what our opponent would do with these back rows. But let's say we have Darius on the field, we special summon Test Tiger and tribute it. And for our purposes here, we're going to say our opponent does not respond to this. So what happens is Test Tiger resolves. So at resolution, Darius gets shuffled in. Another Darius comes out, and we say, okay, Chainlink 1, declare Darius effect to target Bestiari. We're going to target Bestiari. Now our opponent could interact here, and for this example, we're going to use Bottomless. And the one thing I want to say is that Bottomlessing Darius specifically in this process is the most unique and actually incorrect ruling in Edison that exists when it comes to this to Darius. It only exists because someone made a mistake back in the day, and we play by the era's rules. It was corrected shortly after Edison and wouldn't work this way. But I want to show you how it does work in Edison so that you know that. And especially, I want to highlight Bottomless because this is one of your most common interactive cards that's going to come up in the middle of this. So we've chainlinked 1 Darius, target Bestiari. And we've chainlinked, your opponent chainlinked 2 Bottomless on Darius. In this example, we're not going to book a moon yet. I'll show you what book a moon would do next. But in this case, chainlink 2 resolves, Darius is going to get banished. Chainlink 1 is going to resolve, Bestiari gets summoned to the field. And again, what's incorrect about this ruling is that Bestiari does get special summoned, which is correct. However, what is also true in the case of Bottomlessing Darius is that Bestiari is on the field and negated. So even though it doesn't get shuffled in, it does hit the field. It does technically, you have to declare a target on this summon by just the mandatory effect. However, it is negated. And even if you were to, let's say, attack and attempt to tag out, nothing is going to come out because that Bestiari is basically at this point permanently negated by Darius' effect. Now again, I'm going to talk about how this works with basically every other card here in a moment, but just know that Bottomless is an exception to the rule in Edison, and that's how it works if Bottomless specifically hits the Darius in the middle of the process. Is the GB Darius targets, does get special summoned, it does not get shuffled in, however, it does have its effect permanently negated. So now let's go back to the top of this, and let's say our opponent does not negate that. Let's say Darius gets targeted by a Tiger. We Darius effect target we're ignoring our other options here. We're just saying we're targeting Bestiari. And let's say our opponent now, for some reason instead, which chooses to Torrential Tribute, or let's say they had Regeki Break or Karma Cut, or basically anything else that would take Darius off the field in this chain before Darius effect to special summon Bestiari resolves. So we're going to say they Torrential now as Chainlink 2. So at resolution, Chainlink 2 is going to kill Darius. And then at Chainlink 1, Bestiari is going to get special summoned out. You're going to be able to declare Bestiari's effect now, and Bestiari is not going to be negated. So it would actually, in this circumstance, destroy the Dimensional Prison and also be able to attack and tag out if you wanted to go get another GB after that. It's a fully real Bestiari at this point. And so that's because of, again, how every card should work, but Bottomless being the exception. Torrential, any other removal of Darius is going to go ahead and do exactly what we just saw, which is bring the GB out, have it on the field, not shuffle it in, and it has its effect as like just a normal GB on the field. So now, instead of responding to Darius, let's talk about the ways that your opponents can respond to Bestiari. So we go back to our top here. We say Tiger, target our Darius. Darius Chainlink 1 targets Bestie. They don't respond. At resolution, Bestiari hits the field. Bestiari Chainlink 1 has to respond and hit a target. And they say, okay, you're going to target Prison. Great. So again, it's negated right now. If your opponent doesn't respond, Prison doesn't get destroyed. And assuming we don't do anything either. But now let's say our opponent decides, you know what, I want to go ahead and Bottomless the Bestiari here, which is a pretty common thing that they might do. If we don't respond here, we'll talk about Book of Moon in a second, But if we don't respond here, at chain link 2 of this chain, Bestiari gets banished. Bestiari is now off of the field, no longer being continuously targeted by our Darius, and Bestiari is going to resolve in this scenario. So our Bestiari target of Dimensional Prison goes through, Prison gets destroyed, Bottomless resolves first at chain link 2, and in chain link 1, Prison is destroyed by Bestiari's effect, and Darius is just on the field and can attack and do whatever it needs to at this point. And so that's a really common interaction as well. Now, another way that this might work, let's say we Darius target our Bestiari, and Bestiari targets Prison, and our opponent triggers Torrential Tribute. Well, it's going to be essentially the same thing as Bottomless here in this case. If we don't respond and can't stop it, Torrential Tribute will resolve as chain link 2, removing both Darius and Bestiari to the graveyard. And because Bestiari is now no longer on the field, being continuously targeted and negated by Darius, the Dimensional Prison would be destroyed in that process. So that's how it's going to work. Again, essentially, if Bestiari is off the field or no longer really being continuously targeted by Darius in one way, shape, or form, its effect will go through. And that's true of all GBs. Again, we're just using Bestiari as this example. It is going to be one of the more common ones to deal with. So let's go ahead and reset this and talk about how we could respond. We're going to take Torrential out of the equation here right now just because kind of changes the logic here. But let's say we just have 2 back rows here and we have Darius already on field. We special Tiger Tribute, target, Darius shuffles in, comes back out. Chain link 1, Darius targets Bestiari. They say, okay, that's fine. At resolution, we special summon Bestiari. We Bestiari mandatory target. We hit Prison. And now your opponent thinks for a second, like, you know what, I want to Bottomless this. So they say chain link 2, Bottomless the Bestiari. Now what we can do at chain link 3 is Book of Moon our Bestiari. So that, obviously the way this resolves then is chain link 3, Bestiari gets flipped face down. At chain link 2, Bottomless is essentially fizzling because it can't check the attack at resolution. And now, because our Bestiari, again, is no longer being continuously targeted by this Darius, its effect is not negated, and our Dimensional Prison is going to be destroyed in this process. Now, it's also important to note that although we did book our Bestiari here because we were responding to Bottomless, let's say for some reason we instead were in a scenario where our opponent decide to say, you know what, let's go back to example A. We go Test Tiger, target Darius. Darius special summons himself out, target Bestiari. And our opponent chooses to activate Bottomless Trap Hole here. Well, we could, again, chain link 3, Book of Moon our Darius if we wanted to protect it. We're probably not doing this if we have like a random back row still. I think you're usually letting Darius die here, but we could book Darius, preventing the Bottomless from resolving. Darius is going to resolve at chain link 1 and special summon our Bestiari. Our Bestiari is going to be able to activate its effect and target the Prison. And because, again, this continuous targeting is not happening, the negation is not occurring, and so Bestiari would resolve here because there is not a target at the resolution point where Darius is negating the Bestiari. And the final thing to clarify, I think, in this kind of chain building process would be, let's say instead of this, we had our opponent, for some reason, was choosing to, let's say we're a Geki break our Darius in the middle of this process because they're like, you know what, we get, let's put this back in grave, just start from the top of this example. So we're going to special summon Tiger target Darius. For some reason, they're like, you know what, this is not where I want to chain, but Darius is going to target Bestiari. Okay, that's fine. They let that go. Bestiari hits the field. We mandatory target. Let's just say Prison again. Let's say at this point, our opponent is like, you know what, I waited too long, but I know that all I have to do is Regeki break the Darius, and both things are going to be removed from the field. Well, if let's say we go chain link 1 Bestiari target prison, chain link 2 they Regeki break our Darius, attempting to remove both GBs from the field. We can also Book of Moon our Darius here in the middle of the process. And at chain link 3 resolution, Darius will get put face down. Regeki break obviously still resolves and destroys our Darius. However, because that connection was broken as soon as Darius got flipped face down on chain link 3, the continuous targeting is gone. That means that our Bestiari is no longer negated, and it is no longer going to be shuffled into the deck because Darius never left the field while it was still continuously targeting the Bestiari. So the way this would work is break resolves, Darius gets destroyed, and then prison would also be destroyed as well at chain link 1 because Bestiari is no longer being negated. So those are kind of the most common things that will come up in terms of some of the trap cards your opponent could have in the middle of the process, and hopefully you can start to apply those to your own scenarios. What I want to do now is actually step back into some more potentially like real scenarios in games that we can use some of these tricks to our advantage. And so let's go ahead and set up a board where we have, let's say we have like for whatever reason, our opponent has a Starlight Road on the board that we know. And let's say we have some strong inclinations, they have a double Raikou set up. Well, at face value, if this is our hand, it kind of looks a little bit intimidating. We know we can't really attack through. We can't freely Gazaris because we think they have Road, or we know they have Road. But we kind of don't want to just like let them flip Raikous on their turn and go from there. And so what we can do here is we can special our Tiger, tribute it. Darius on his summon can target our Bestiari. We can get Bestiari out, and now Bestiari at chain link 1 can target our Starlight Road. Our opponent can't respond here, so in chain link 2, let's say we decide to Book of Moon either Darius or Bestiari here, doesn't matter. And then at resolution, Bestiari is going to go ahead and destroy this Starlight Road, clearing the way for us to go ahead and contact directly into another Gazaris, meaning we can break what looked like a pretty, I would say, secure, not necessarily formidable, but a secure board for our opponent, allowing us to attack for 24, tag out, and probably do a lot of damage and hopefully give ourselves a game-winning move there. And all that's because we can use Book of Moon to our advantage to get essentially like an extra pop out of the Bestiari, the Darius Bestiari combo that eventually goes into Gazaris to pop 2. So it's a really kind of valuable tool to have in our arsenal to be able to use that Book of Moon and essentially turn it into a MST through Bestiari's effect in the process. So that's a really common one. And again, like the Bestiari interactions are going to be the most common simply because they are, like Darius's most common target is probably Bestiari as you play the game more and more. So now let's talk about another scenario that might come up where they've got a bunch of back row. Maybe we think it's most likely battle traps, and we can figure that out maybe a little bit by normal summoning Darius and they don't respond. So we don't think it's summon interruption. But we're kind of in a tricky spot to try and close out the game here because we can't really attack without having to potentially lose something right now. We do have like a Gazaris combo in play, but let's say they have a Starlight Road, or we think they do. It makes it a little bit dangerous, and also even if we ended up making just a lone Gazaris, we wouldn't even be able to go for game here. We're 100 life points short, so we're still keeping them in the game. But we do also, in this scenario, let's say we have a Heraklinos in field, which could attack for game, and if we can get Heraklinos negation effect, we can attack and have success through like a prison and a mirror force like they have here. And there is a way for us to do that based off what we have here in Compulse. And so as an example, we're going to say we're going to special the Tiger after normaling Darius successfully. They don't respond. We're going to shuffle Darius in, get Darius back out. And then right now Darius is going to target our Heraklinos. So right now the way it's set up is if Darius gets our Heraklinos, Heraklinos comes to the board. We have 2 cards on field. Heraklinos is negated though. So we still can't attack through it, and we only have 1 negate anyways for a Heraklinos, even though he's not real. But what we can do is, after we target our Heraklinos, at chain link 2, where we can compulse our Darius, return Darius to hand, and now what happens is we get our Heraklinos to the field. When Heraklinos hits the field, he's live and has his effect because Darius is no longer on the field, negating him. And we also have 2 negates in hand for Heraklinos, giving us decent confidence to be able to attack through the 3 back rows, even knowing like, hey, like as long as they don't have all 3 as disruption for what I'm about to do, we know we're about to go ahead and close out the game. And so it's a way to get a Heraklinos live out of the board using something like Compulse, let's say if we don't have Book of Moon or something like that in the process as well. So now let's talk about another scenario that might involve Darius and Herc that could really flip a game state to our advantage. We're going to assume an open board on our opponent's side, and we just have some GBs, and we do have Darius in the deck. We have Herc in graveyard, and we have identified that Herc with Chariot Set is probably the best thing that we could have in this equation. So let's say I go ahead and summon Rediari. I go to battle phase, and Rediari is going to attack. All that works out. So now on my tag out, I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to go Darius, target our Heraklinos at the end of the battle phase. Now, Darius is continually targeting our Heraklinos right now. So it is negated at this moment. And that is what our opponent believes, and it's kind of the board state that we're presenting. However, what we're going to do is I'm going to set our Book of Moon in main phase 2 and pass. And so now what our opponent believes is, okay, you might have a couple set back rows and a Darius with a fake Heraklinos, but this is just a big body on the field. It isn't actually going to negate anything. And so while not intimidating, it's not the most intimidating board for them to potentially try and break. But again, what our opponent doesn't know is that we have Book of Moon set so that we can kind of at any point decide, you know what, we want our Heraklinos to be real. And we don't have to decide until a moment that it makes the most sense. And the best part about doing it this way is our opponent is assuming that their spells and traps are going to go through. So they're going to be more aggressive, maybe, I won't say more reckless, but just they're going to assume that they're not going to have to deal with the negates. So let's say they go ahead and open up with a heavy storm here. What we can do on our end is immediately say, you know what, okay, chain link 2, let's discard Trap Does Shoot to negate this heavy storm. And they're going to be like, well, it's negated, so that's fine. And then as chain link 3, we can go ahead and book our Darius, now destroying that continuous targeting connection of Herc, so that by the time that Herc is resolving in this chain at chain link 2, Herc is no longer being negated. Our negation of his heavy storm goes through, and now we have a live Herc on board with a Chariot set, an extra body on the field, and still another negate in hand. And so I really love playing these Book of Moon scenarios this way on our opponent's turn when it's possible, because it basically steals our opponent's turns. And when you can get your opponent to spend an entire turn operating in a really incorrect way based off of the board that they're reading, you can usually get a lot of value out of that turn. And so I'm a very big fan of trying to get a Herc live this way whenever we can, so that we can allow our opponent to be baited into doing something on the board that is really advantageous for us for them to like waste a resource as important as like a heavy storm, or let's say like a miracle fusion or something like that. So let's rewind a little bit, and let's say this similar type of process can also work for any GB, obviously, but let's say it's Gazaris in our case. So we're going to go back to step 1 on our turn over here. We have Book of Moon in hand. We successfully go into battle. We attack with the Rediari, and Rediari tags out, and we go, hey, we really need taggable bodies right now. Let's go ahead and Darius our Gazaris to the field, and then similarly set our Book of Moon and pass. So while obviously, like, for some reason we decided in this case Herc wasn't the most logical thing, or maybe Herc's not available, but we do have Gazaris on the board. Again, to our opponent, it looks just like a 2400 body. But for us, we know that we can make this a real Gazaris whenever we need to. So we can pass to our opponent, and then our opponent's side, let's say they basically are like, well, I have Dark Grepher, and I'm going to Dark Grepher attempt to just go ahead and suicide into this Darius. And from their perspective, they think Darius is going to go, Grepher goes, and then Bestiari, Gazarish goes with it. So what we can do instead, though, should we choose to, is just say, okay, take out my Darius, we'll set it. Because Darius is set before it gets destroyed, that connection is broken. Now we end this turn with Gazarish as a real coming into our turn, and we can attack over the Grepher on the board, and also then tag out for 2, and really just probably take another really big shift and advantage in the game by turning a single Darius tag into 2 GBs that are available to do whatever it is we need to happen next. So now I want to talk about another scenario here that might come up in your games. And that's a scenario where, let's say our opponent has an open board, we have a Tiger and a GB in hand. And while in most cases you're probably thinking, okay, I'm going to try and go Secutor here, in our case here, unfortunately, our Secutor is already in the graveyard. And so that's not available for us. But there's still a way that we can get to the point of having our Secutor resolve and really get some massive pluses out of this turn to set ourselves up in a game-winning state. So let's say, in this case, we normal our Darius or any GB, we special our Tiger Tribute, we go get Darius out of the deck, and Darius instantly goes and gets our Secutor to the field for us. So now we have Darius and Secutor on field. Darius is continuously targeting and negating our Secutor. However, our Secutor 1, keep in mind, is a mandatory effect, so it's going to attempt to activate no matter what at the end of the battle phase. And 2, we have our Book of Moon in hand, meaning we can make sure that our Secutor actually resolves here. So let's say we attack with both successfully. Our Secutor, we decide, is the first effect that we're going to activate. So we activate Secutor at Chainlink 1. And then at Chainlink 2, we Book of Moon our Secutor, so that by the resolving time of Chainlink's 1 Secutor effect, the continuous negation is no longer true, and our Secutor is actually going to resolve in this case. So all of a sudden we can say, okay, look, well, I'll go snag my double Equestes, I can get another Chariot out, I can go get another body, let's say I want my Bestiari in hand. And then because Darius is no longer connected to our Secutor, we could also tag Darius out because he's not going to take an extra GB body with him. Let's say that means we go to get our Laquari, and then we go ahead and let's say in this circumstance we're going to say we're going to make another Heraklinos, put him on board, set our, in this case, second Chariot that we already had 1 set. But now we added essentially another discard to our hand for this real Heraklinos that we have on board now. We still have another GB body on field, and we added a Chariot in that process as well. And so it's just another way to think about using Darius to unlock a effect out of the graveyard that's really valuable for us, like Secutor, in maybe a game state that isn't as obvious that it's available to use that and get the extra tags. Because really, you can kind of view like every tagged GB as a +1 in the process. So we did use Tiger and we did use Book in the process there. However, we went from so we did a direct swap of Tiger and Book to get Secutor to the board, Secutor to the board, so that was -1, but then Secutor got 2 out, so we were +1 just when the monsters themselves hit at that point. But the real big positive here comes, each Equesti was +1 itself. So we went +1 on monsters, then we're +3 in terms of card advantage because of the Equesti pluses, and then we turned into Herc with the Chariot that we got back from the graveyard. And it's just a really big positive turn for us because we're using Book of Moon and Test Tiger correctly to unlock a really powerful play for us. So now let's take a look at another scenario that is probably one of the rarest things that you would end up needing to do inside of a combo like this, but is something that has come up maybe 2 or 3 times for me in competitive play, and it usually is the difference in winning the game or losing the game. And that is to get like a boosted Laquari to the board to get that attack boost that we need to just close out a game. In this example, I've set it up so we look at our banished thing and we have all of our big fusions are banished, Bestiari is banished, We have, let's say, even like one of our Laquaris are banished. So there's just a Laquari in the graveyard, no Laquaris in the deck, Murmillo's in the graveyard. They have a Stardust on field. So this is a pretty, I would say, difficult board for a GB deck to handle without some of these key pieces available to us. But there's still a way that we can actually take a game shot out of this using some of our Darius combinations to get that Laquari live. So we can summon our Darius and special our Test Tiger and tribute our Tiger to target our Darius. Darius, in this case, because our Laquaris aren't in the deck, we can't just get the Laquari out and go 2100. It's in the graveyard. And so what we have to do is Darius is going to declare its effect, and it's going to target Laquari. And the reason I wanted to show this example is because it's just slightly different than a lot of the GBs. Because Laquari and Bottomless don't activate, they check their condition like the moment that they hit the field outside of a chain. And so if Laquari is being negated when he hits the field by the Darius, he'll never get the extra 300 attack that he needs. So in this circumstance, we need to chainlink 1, Darius target Laquari, chainlink 2, Darius is going to be booked by us, meaning that continuous negation will no longer occur. So we get our Laquari out of the graveyard. Our Laquari does know it was summoned by a GB, so it gets its boost, and it's able to go ahead and attack over this Shura for us. And this might be the same too. If this was just like a Sirocco on board and we didn't have Murmillo available, it's another way that we could get around something like that. And so in this case, yes, it's going for game, but there are times where you just need that attack boost or something like that. And the only way that we could figure out how to do it is something like this. It's pretty resource intensive, so you're only doing it if it's super meaningful to probably close the game or just not lose it, hopefully. But this is a good example that won't be coming up that frequently, but it's just something else to think about and important to know about the ordering in which we have to book or compulse our Darius prior to our Laquari hitting the field so that we get the attack boost that we needed out of him to go ahead and close the game. So I've set up one final board for us to look at in this video when we talk about how to use Darius in really creative ways. And obviously there's other conditions in this specific example kind of showing how crazy this could be. It doesn't have to be as crazy as 5 monsters and a couple back rows. It could be a lot simpler than that. But just knowing the trick of how to unlock a Torrential on your side in a positive way is really the takeaway here, using Darius. So in this case, we're going to just go ahead and normal our Darius to the field, and they're not going to respond. We're going to say, let's go ahead and special summon our Tiger, attribute it, targeting Darius. That's going to go through. Darius now is going to come out of the deck, and chainlink 1 Darius is going to, in this case, we're going to say target Heraklinos. And then chainlink 2, we're going to activate our own Torrential. Obviously, in this case, I kind of made it even crazier by adding the Prime Material and Stardust on their side, but they would certainly Stardust drag in that Torrential. We would then declare our Chariot in chainlink 4. So this resolves in chainlink 4, Stardust is destroyed. In chainlink 3, Stardust is negated, so it doesn't happen. In chainlink 2 now, Torrential resolves, meaning all of our monsters on both sides are leaving the field entirely. And then for us, at chainlink 1, we get a real Heraklinos to the field because Darius has already left the field. He's no longer going to be actively negating our Heraklinos. So now we have Heraklinos on board, live with the fact we could attack through any back row directly and have our double negates in hand to push through a couple back row, whatever they are in this case, and be able to go ahead and go for game. And so the key takeaway there really is like another way to get some value out of Torrential if they get a board is to be able to use our fact that Darius at chainlink 1 can be special summoning something, and at chainlink 2 we can Torrential, meaning we can clear the road for whatever Darius brings in to be on the field with effect and be able to attack directly and not worry about bigger monsters, especially is when that's a really helpful trick to be able to do. And so I really like that one as well as a cool trick to get a lot of value. And usually if you pull one of those types of moves off, you are winning the game. It doesn't happen every game by any means. A lot of things there have to be unique about setting some of those scenarios up. but it's another cool way to take advantage of Darius and the uniqueness of the way that he works inside the deck. So those are all the Darius examples I have for you in this video today on how he works, how he functions, why he functions the way that he does. My goal again in this video was for you to take away really the why Darius functions the way he does so that you can apply it to any scenarios in your games that pop up and know how he's going to interact with any type of card that can pop up, because you know the continuous targeting element, and that being the core part that you need to understand to then be able to apply really any type of card effect or any chain building to Darius's summoning processes or how he's already on the field. I think the biggest takeaway I'd want to say is also don't just do these tricks because you can. Book of Moons and Compulses are usually the two types of resources that you're going to have to use in excess to unlock some of these types of moves, in addition to Darius sometimes, or in addition to Test Tiger sometimes. And a lot of times we want to do the coolest thing and not the smartest thing. So just try and avoid just doing some of these tricks sometimes because you can. But just know that they are there. And so when you have, like in your main phase one, especially like a Tiger plus a Book of Moon or Compulse set, run through the processes and scenarios of what's in your graveyard that could be a better solution than what else you might have that might make sense too. And then just decide what the best opportunity is. So hopefully this is valuable. You enjoyed the video, you enjoyed the examples. Feel free to comment any other examples that you have that you've done with Darius or other AGBs, and look for other videos in the future. Have a good one.